The bright lights of the television studio glittered as the cameras rolled. The View, America's most watched daytime talk show, was in full swing, the hosts bantering over headlines and controversies. Seated at the table, host Raven Porter smirked, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping on the glass mug of tea. Raven had made a career out of controversy, sharp-tongued, provocative, unafraid to jab at anyone, anything, including, today, religion. "Well, let's be honest," Raven drawled, brushing her sleek black hair over one shoulder. "This country has become obsessed with clinging to old, outdated traditions. God, seriously? Do we really still believe in fairy tales from 2,000 years ago?" The studio audience gave a scattered laugh, some clapping. Raven flashed her dazzling grin, feeding off the attention. Host Mara shifted uncomfortably. "Raven, maybe we should be careful," a broken bar. But Raven waved her off. "Oh, come on. We're in 2025. Science, reason, progress. And yet people still pray to a sky daddy, thinking he's listening to their petty problems. Give me a break." Backstage, Karoline Leavitt adjusted the lapel mic clip to her blazer. She was moments from being introduced as the show's guest, invited to discuss faith and values among younger Americans. The producers knew she was sharp, a fast-rising conservative voice, but they hadn't warned her about Raven's on-air shots. As Raven's voice carried through the studio, mocking believers, Karoline's expression tightened. She folded her hands, steadying her breath. "Karoline, you're up," a producer whispered. The cameras panned to the stage entrance as the announcer boomed, "Please welcome Karoline Leavitt." She stepped out confidently, a small smile on her lips, her eyes bright but calm. The audience clapped politely. A few faces showed wariness as she was known as a fierce debater. Karoline shook hands with the hosts, taking a seat directly across from Raven. "Well, Karoline," Raven began smoothly, "I was just saying how surprising it is that people your age are still hanging on to, religious myths." "What's that about?" Karoline smiled politely. "Thank you for having me, Raven. I caught some of your comments backstage, and I have to say there's a difference between questioning faith and outright mocking it." Raven arched an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm not mocking. I'm just a broken bar pointing out the obvious." Karoline leaned slightly forward. "No, you are mocking. And you know what's really outdated? Arrogance. The belief that because we live in a modern age, we're somehow too sophisticated for humility, for wonder, for acknowledging forces beyond ourselves." The audience murmured. Raven's smile faltered. Karoline continued, her voice cool and clear. "You sit here, on national television, belittling people of faith as if they're foolish or backward. But let me ask you, Thesa, what do you actually know about the people you're mocking? About their struggles, their reasons, their hopes?" Raven scoffed. "I know plenty. I grew up Catholic. I left because it's nonsense." Karoline nodded. "You left, and that's your right. But leaving doesn't make you superior to those who stay. It doesn't give you the moral high ground to ridicule them." Raven opened her mouth, but Karoline held up a hand gently. "You mock God, Raven, but the real question is, what are you afraid of? Why does the idea of faith make you so uncomfortable that you feel the need to tear it down in front of millions?" The audience was hushed now, eyes darting between the two women. Raven shifted in her seat, her usual poise rattled. Karoline's voice softened. "You know what's easy? Sitting here, laughing at things you claim to have outgrown. You know what's hard? Living with conviction, facing your own limitations, accepting that you're not the center of the universe." For a moment, the cameras captured Raven's face, ear-tight, defensive. Karoline smiled slightly. "I didn't come here to argue. I came here because there are millions of people watching who feel unseen and unheard, who feel ridiculed every time someone like you mocks their beliefs. And I want them to know they're not alone. They matter." The audience erupted in applause, loud and sustained. Raven looked down, smoothing her note cards, her sharp tongue dulled for once. When the show wrapped, Karoline slipped backstage, exhaling deeply. Her team greeted her with proud smiles. But the moment wasn't over. That evening, clips of the confrontation went viral. Headlines blared, Karoline Leavitt stuns Raven Porter on national TV. Social media flooded with praise and criticism. Karoline sat alone in her hotel room, scrolling through the reactions. Some hailed her courage, others attacked her, calling her a zealot, a show-off, a manipulator. She sighed, setting the phone down. She hadn't gone on The View to become a viral sensation. She'd gone because she believed people deserved a voice, even if that voice came at a cost. But the cost was only beginning. The next morning, her team informed her that several sponsors were reconsidering their partnerships. Media outlets were dissecting her words, twisting them into political weapons. And then came the threats to anonymous emails, hateful messages, accusations of being a religious extremist. Karoline sat with her team in a small office, tension crackling in the air. "We can weather this," one advisor said firmly. "But you need to decide. Are you willing to stand your ground, or do you want to issue a soft apology, maybe a clarification?" Karoline looked around the room, eyes steady. "I'm not apologizing for defending people's right to believe." Her team exchanged glances, some relieved, some anxious. Karoline stood. "This isn't about me and Raven. It's about a culture that's decided faith is something to laugh at. And I'm not backing down." As she left the room, her phone buzzed with another flood of notifications. News outlets wanted interviews. Supporters were organizing rallies. Detractors were planning protests. Karoline took a deep breath. She had walked onto The View expecting a conversation. Instead, she'd ignited a firestorm. But deep down, she knew, sometimes it takes a costly lesson to remind the world what matters. And Raven Porter, once untouchable on daytime television, was about to learn just how costly that lesson would be. By the time the sun set on the second day, the media storm had fully exploded. Raven Porter sat alone in her private dressing room, scrolling through headlines on her tablet. Karoline Leavitt schools The View host on faith. America reacts. Was Raven Porter out of line? Faith versus mockery. The debate gripping social media. Raven slammed the tablet onto the table with a frustrated sigh. She had built her career on being untouchably smart, sharp, fearless. But now the public was split. Fans who once adored her sarcasm were questioning whether she'd crossed a line. Worse, the network's executive producer had called her that morning. "Raven, we're getting pressure from sponsors," he'd said. "They don't like this heat. Maybe a broken bar. Dial it back next episode." Dial it back? Raven Porter didn't dial back. That wasn't who she was. But the producer's warning gnawed at her. Meanwhile, across town, Karoline Leavitt sat in a quiet cafe copyright with her team. She was calm on the outside, but inside she felt the pressure mounting. "Karoline, we just got a request from Fox, CNN, even BBC," her press manager said, scrolling through messages. "Everyone wants a sit down. You're the hottest political guest in the country right now." Karoline sipped her coffee, thoughtful. "I didn't want this to turn into a circus." Her manager gave a dry laugh. Too late. Karoline tapped her fingers on the table. She'd stood her ground, yes. But now it was more than just a sharp TV moment. It was a cultural battle, and she was being pulled into the center of it. That evening, Raven paced her apartment, trying to rehearse how she'd handle the next episode. Should she address the backlash? Should she double down or soften? Her phone buzzed. Her producer again. "Karoline Leavitt has agreed to come back for a one-on-one discussion next week," he said carefully. "You in?" Raven's mouth went dry. "A rematch on live TV?" "Yeah," she said after a beat. "I'm in." A week later, the studio was packed. Cameras zoomed in. Audiences leaned forward in their seats. This wasn't just another daytime talk episode. This was being billed as the conversation America needed. Raven sat tall at the table, her nerves hidden behind a polished smile. Karoline sat across from her, poised but calm, her hands folded on the table. Raven opened. "So, Karoline, here we are again. A lot has been said in the last few days." Karoline nodded. "Yes, a lot has." Raven gave a practiced laugh. "Look, I'll be honest, I've always been the kind of person who questions a broken bar everything, and I don't apologize for that. But maybe I should ask you, why do you think people like me push back so hard on faith?" The audience grew still. Karoline looked at her, eyes steady. Because deep down, people like you are searching for something too. But you've been taught that showing vulnerability is weakness. So instead, you armor yourself with irony, with sarcasm, with mockery. You tear down what you don't understand because you're afraid to admit you might need it. Raven's smile flickered, just slightly. Karoline continued softly, Raven, this isn't about you and me on opposite sides. This is about a culture that's starving for meaning, and we're distracting ourselves with noise, with cheap shots, with entertainment that numbs instead of nourishes. Raven took a slow breath. Okay, but what about all the harm that's been done in the name of religion? Don't we have a right to question? Karoline nodded firmly. Absolutely. Question, challenge, demand accountability. But don't mock the core, the human longing for connection to something bigger, the desire for hope, for redemption, for love that doesn't end at the grave. For a moment, the table was silent. The audience held its breath. Then Raven leaned forward slightly. You know, a broken bar, I didn't expect you to be this persuasive. Karoline gave a small smile. I'm not here to persuade. I'm here to remind. The episode ended with an unexpected memento. Raven thanking Karoline, not sarcastically, but sincerely. The audience gave a standing ovation. Some people visibly moved. But once the cameras stopped, the real cost began. Behind the scenes, network executives huddled. Ratings had spiked, sure, but some sponsors were nervous. She can't keep pushing this religious angle, one executive muttered. Our brand isn't faith-based. Meanwhile, Karoline's team was fielding threats, both legal and personal. Advocacy groups accused her of promoting dangerous conservatism. Activists flooded her social media with hate. But Karoline stayed focused. She kept showing up, giving interviews, writing op-eds, speaking at rallies, not to gain fame, but because she believed the conversation mattered. Then, one morning, Raven got a shocking call. The network wanted to rebrand The View. They wanted less political bickering, more thoughtful dialogue. And they wanted Hira Ravana to lead the change. At first, she balked. You want me to tone down? To become me a broken bar? What, a preacher? No. The producer said calmly, we want you to be real, to show growth. Viewers are tired of the same old fights. Raven sat quietly after the call, thinking, could she do it? Could she let down her armor, admit that maybe, just maybe, there were things she didn't have all figured out? Across the country, Karoline received a message, an invitation from Raven. Not for another debate, but for a joint appearance at a national town hall on faith, doubt, and culture. Karoline read the message twice. Then she smiled. The costly lesson Raven had learned wasn't just about faith, though it was about humility. About recognizing that real strength comes not from tearing down, but from being willing to listen, to learn, to stand up when it's easier to sit down. Weeks later, the two women stood on stage together at the town hall. The moderator asked, Raven, after everything that's happened, what's the biggest thing you've learned? Raven took the mic, her voice softer than usual. I've learned that mocking is easy, but listening, really listening, a broken bar, that's hard. And Karoline taught me that. The audience applauded warmly. Karoline spoke next. And I've learned that even the sharpest critics can have open hearts, if you give them the chance. The town hall became one of the most watched broadcasts of the year, and not because of scandal or shock value, but because people were hungry for real conversation. In the months that followed, Raven's career shifted. She became known not just as a provocateur, but as someone willing to evolve. Karoline's influence grew, but she stayed grounded, remembering that her goal wasn't popularity, it was purpose. Their unlikely dialogue sparked nationwide discussions, inspiring countless viewers to reflect on their own beliefs, assumptions, and biases. And quietly, behind the cameras, Raven and Karoline developed a grudging respect, even a tentative friendship, a proof that even in an age of division, connection was still possible. The costly lesson Raven had once resisted became the foundation of a new chapter in her life, one marked not by mockery, but by meaning. And for Karoline, the experience reminded her that faith's greatest power wasn't in crushing enemies, but in transforming hearts. Even the hardest ones,